Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Forum YouTube. I'm Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona with producer Bobby helping us out as we head over to Monmouth Park for a preview of the Grade 3 Salvator Mile. We're going to take a look at Haskell Preview Day, which is getting you all ready for July 19th, which I believe is Haskell Day. I think, David, some of the horses in this race will try to prep for the Monmouth Cup next month. And no shock to see Bishop's Bay installed as the 6-5 morning line favorite to the outside. The most accomplished, hasn't done a whole lot wrong in his career, but from a running style standpoint, he is a horse that wants to be pretty close. He's not a horse that wants to come from necessarily off the pace. So the outside draw sometimes can be a little tricky if he's hooked wide, but I think certainly the one they'll all have to hold off or the one to have to worry about in here.
Yeah, Brad Cox is just so good at spreading his top horses out across different racetracks and circuits and finding spots where they figure to be short prices, and it feels like that's definitely the case for Bishop's Bay, who, as you say, has just run well in just about every start and feels like the horse to beat in here.
So let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector. Nelson Avenue is pretty quick. Coming out of some fast races, he was actually right on the lead sprinting last time out, going like 44-1. So we know he can fly. To the outside, Bishop's Bay wants to be close. Maybe one or two others, like Awfully Cool, has some versatility. I don't think he's quite as quick as some of the others. Awesome Ruda coming out of some sprints. I'd imagine that's sort of like the bulk of the speed players in here.
Yeah, I didn't see a ton of pace in this race. I mean, horses like Trademark have had more speed in the past, maybe not so much so recently. Bishop's Day will go forward from the outside. I did think Nelson Avenue was going to make the lead. It's pretty confirmed at this point. His only real chance is to go to the front end in these races, so I'd imagine they'd be most aggressive with him.
Let's meet the field here for the Salvator Mile. This is a Grade 3 event, $150,000 up for grabs. It's going to go as race number 10 on Saturday at Monmouth Park. Anti-Gravity will kick things off. This one was Grade 3 place, but that was when still being defeated by like 15, 16 plus lengths in the Grade 3 Islin. Been facing softer company and not really competitive in the last couple starts this year. So this is going to be a pretty sizable step up in class.
Yeah, there are a couple of horses from this barn in this race that I thought were a little tough to make a case for. He's definitely one of them. Just hasn't run a recent speed figure, really a speed figure ever that makes him one of the contenders in here. So I thought he was one of the outsiders.
Trademark is a Grade 2 winner. He won the Clark back in 2023. But since then, 6 starts, he hasn't been better than 4th beaten 7+ lengths. So you're kind of going back and forth with him. Now he has to deal with a 7.5-month layoff. I had a tough time getting a read on him, David. What do we do with Trademark?
He's got races in his past that would make him awfully tough for a horse like
Yep.
Bishop's Bay to handle, and especially at Monmouth Park back in 2023 when he ran a nice race in this Salvator Mile 2 years ago, and then following up in the Islin with a 99 buyer, just barely losing that race. But as you said, his 2024 campaign was a big disappointment after that Clark victory at the end of 2023. Just never got back to form last year. Now he's coming off a layoff. Not the best move for this trainer. Does seem like he has a nice work tab for this race, but I'd still rather watch one before I back him.
Yeah, that stretch at the end of 2023 was really solid, but he's an enigma. And when you talk about horse racing enigmas, Tuscan Sky up next, he's one of the bigger ones because he certainly has talent, and we've seen him show up with big efforts, especially one right here at Monmouth Park in the Pegasus when he won by 6 lengths last year, almost a year ago to the day of this race, earned a 99 buyer speed figure. And at that point, he had won 3 of his first 4 starts in his career. And you feel like, okay, this is going to be like a legitimate horse now in the 3-year-old division at the end of the season. And we just haven't really seen him ever kind of put couple races together or step forward. There's 1 or 2 in there, David. The Discovery was fine. He was an okay 3rd in the Go Zapper, kind of running on late behind White Abario and Power Squeeze. But we know there's a lot of ability there with this horse. He just can't seem to put it all together or kind of find the right spot. It just there's always something that kind of comes up for him, and maybe one day he'll get it all together. Do you think it could be Saturday?
Yeah, this horse has talent. He just doesn't show it all the time. And it feels like those big efforts have gotten fewer and farther between lately, as he hasn't put up forth one of those since that Discovery that you were mentioning towards the end of last year, where he ran great that day at Aqueduct, contesting an honest pace and battling back at the end when challenged at the end. But his 4 races since then make him pretty tough to like in this spot, especially the Ghost Sapper 2-back,
Yeah.
where it felt like there was very little in that race beyond White Abarrio, and he couldn't even finish second in that spot. He's lost his early speed, and he's the kind of horse that's really only successful when he's towards the front end, and he might not get there in this race.
Now, I always get nervous when like a good barn and good connections like this, they take a shot on the turf. It almost seems like they're just trying to see if something sticks. Now moving back to the dirt, it just feels like for right now he's going to be a shorter price than what I would like to play him at in a spot like this. We move on to Awfully Cool. So he was a second in the Long Branch at Monmouth back in 2023. Now he's a multiple stakes winner, has some speed, but can sit off a little bit. For me, David, the biggest concern is that 6 of his 7 victories have come at Parks. He's a 15 for 18 in the money overall, so a really, really honest horse. But he has done a lot of his best work over at Parks, where he won most recently. And I think we have a replay of his most recent win.
Yeah, he was beating a weaker field this day, but puts in that solid late run that we've grown accustomed to seeing from him. Doesn't always get there, but as you said, he's always trying hard at the end of his races, is typically involved in the finish. This is a step up in class for him, but you've got to at least appreciate the reliability of a horse like this, especially having just discussed a horse like Tuscan Sky, who is so unreliable. You kind of know what you're going to get from Awfully Cool. Might not be good enough to win this race, but I won't be surprised when he's picking up some pieces at the end.
Surface to Air is another horse who has some races you could go back to last year that were very solid. That would probably put him right in the mix. I mean, the Churchill race in November, the Keeneland race right before that, those 2 back-to-back races where he threw up 93 Beyer speed figures, those are really solid. You could probably be forgiving for that race in the muddy track last time out at Parks too, and just put a line through that. So looking at those races last year, those are good races. But now we have a 5.5-month layoff to deal with, and kind of a step up in class too. We're looking at the work tab. It looks like there's only about 4 works or so too in the last few months. So I got a feeling this horse will probably need a race or two. David, if he had one coming into this race, I would play him because I liked him last year in a couple of those spots, but the layoff concerns me a little bit. Can you build a case for him?
Yeah, I also like him as a racehorse. He's a real overachiever. He's won at some big prices during his career, especially in the last year, and it seems like the 2-turn distance really works for him. The problem with him, Gino, twofold. I mean, you mentioned the layoff. I agree. Coming back in a spot like this is not ideal. He was actually entered on Belmont Stakes week at Saratoga in an allowance race, got scratched out of that. So maybe this wasn't the initially intended return spot. And furthermore, he's tried Stakes Company a few times where he's raced off Lasix, and it's pretty clear those are not his best efforts. So coming back in a spot like this where he can't use Lasix, I just wonder if it's really ideal for him.
Number 6 is Vitality. He's actually the Prince of Wales Stakes winner. That's one of the races in the Canadian Triple Crown. So that was last year as a 3-year-old. He was moved into a new barn, and then in his first start at 4, I thought was pretty good. Actually comes off of a career best Beyer speed figure. That was first start in the Joe Orsino barn. Not sure exactly who he was beating, but again, coming off of an 89 Beyer speed figure, he was kept out 3 wide. Made a big move up to challenge and then blew by. I think we actually have a replay of that one as well, David. So I generally like horses kind of like this that showed some ability earlier in their career. They move into a new barn, and then first time in the new barn, really impressive. So I think he's really heading in the right direction. The big concern I would have is he doesn't seem like he has a whole lot of early speed. And sometimes at Monmouth Park, that could put you in a bad spot. Although he did run off well here at Gulfstream Park, which we can also think of as a speed favoring track sometimes. So what do you think about Vitality here now, second time for Joe Orseno?
Yeah, this was a nice victory that we just took a look at last time out. As you said, not beating the strongest field, but you had to like the way he drew away at the end, especially coming off the layoff. He was a horse they entered in the Pegasus World Cup earlier this January. Probably a good idea to scratch from that race because he didn't look too competitive in there. This is a more realistic spot to try Stakes Company. And as you said, he showed some ability during his 3-year-old season. I just worried a little bit about the last point you were hitting on, that he doesn't have much early speed. Even when you watch him step up against tougher than Harlan's Holiday, the chart calls it Gulfstream can be a little bit misleading. He was way further behind than 6 lengths early. He got really outrun in that race. So I would hope to see him a little bit closer to the pace in this spot.
We move to Nelson Avenue, grade 3 placed. He's a stakes winner, and he's a major pace factor, and certainly a horse that you would really upgrade if there was any kind of wet track on Saturday, because half of his victories have come on a wet track. But David, I think he's the horse that gets the lead in here.
Yeah, I think he is going to get the lead. He really is only successful when they're pretty aggressive with him. So I'd imagine they're going to go forward, especially around the 2 turns, which he hasn't really conquered before. He's been one of those 1 turn mile or 7 furlong to a mile specialists. So the 2 turns is a bit of a question mark. He tried it a few times early in his career with some mixed results. You mentioned that big effort in the mud back over the winter at Parks, that 101 buyer. That's a number that doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. There were a few races on that card at Parks that were won in gate to wire fashion with these gigantic speed figures that have just never been replicated. So I don't know if I view him as being quite that good. However, this horse is getting a pretty interesting trainer switch for this race, going from a barn that does not win at a very high percentage to Jorge Abreu, who I think does a great job. This horse has been working well up in Saratoga for this race, and I'm not going to be surprised when we see an improved effort out of this guy.
Awesome Ruda is the next one, and some positives for him. He stakes placed, and if you look at the 5 races since coming into the Ward barn, they're all pretty solid. They're all in the money, but now he's going to step up and face a lot tougher. He's just going to have to run a lot faster based on speed figures, and this company is just a lot classier than what he's been facing. So I'll give him some positive marks for the races that he's been running for the new barn, but David, this is another big step up that he's going to have to face in here.
Yeah, I like the fact that they've given him the 2 sprints off the layoff before trying to stretch out to a route race like this. They're just trying to stretch out in an awfully tough spot, and I agree. He seems a little overmatched.
And he'll probably have some speed to deal with on both sides, because to his inside, he'll have Nelson Avenue, and then right to his outside, he's going to have the horse to beat in here, Bishop's Bay, who's a grade 3 winner, multiple graded stakes place. He's never been worse than second in his 9 starts. Most recently, he was at Belmont and Aqueduct. He was in the Westchester. He was inside. He pushed through into a battle with Quince Brew. He gained advantage in the final yards and final maybe 100 yards or so and put that one away. We already saw the 4th place finisher from that race, David Bank Frenzy, come back and win the $200,000 commentator, that New York bred stakes race next time out with a 97 buyer speed figure. So a pretty good spot for him. As you were pointing out, this is really what Brad Cox does well. Like, he finds the spot where Bishop's Bay is going to be even money in this race because he's the most accomplished horse. He should be able to sit a little bit from the outside if he needs to. This was a pretty good effort where he and Quince Brew were basically locked in battle for most of this race.
Yeah, and Brad Cox has found the right spots for just about every start of Bishop's Bay's career. I mean, you can see just looking down at his past performances, he's never been a higher price than 9-5 in any one of those 9 races. He just goes favorite every time. So you hate to say that a horse that's been in the exacta in all 9 starts is a bit of a disappointment, but based on the way he started his career, you would have thought that maybe he'd be competing in some of the upper level grade 1, grade 2 races by this point in time now as a 5-year-old, and he hasn't quite gotten there yet. He did earn the grade 3 victory in that race we just took a look at, and I do think the horse that he beat in that spot, Quince Brew, is pretty talented, but they were not going quickly up front. It was a pretty slow pace. Those two got to dominate towards the lead. Nobody could close from the back of the pack, so it really was an ideal situation for Bishop's Bay. He might face a more competitive pace scenario here, so I could be convinced to take a shot against him at what's going to be a very short price.
And you and I are both going to do that because we both respect him, and I think he's the most likely winner of this race. But I read into it a little bit also that he's been such an honest horse that I would have liked to see him like step up and maybe face tougher at some point. And I think the fact that Brad Cox is very kind of cautious about the spots that he puts him in, I read into that a little bit, and maybe I'm reading into it too much as a gambler, but I take a shot against him, David, as do you. You're going to look for more of the speedy type to try to beat him, right? And that's how you're going to take a shot against him as we move to selections.
Yeah, I'm going to put the number 7 Nelson Avenue on top. I have never been this horse's biggest fan, to be honest. And like I said, I think his major victory is a bit phony when you look at the past performances. I just like this trainer switch a lot to Jorge Abreu, and I think this horse might be sitting on an improved effort. And maybe the way you beat Bishop's Bay is to try to beat him to the front end and then, discourage him from getting too aggressive and maybe wire the field. That's at least how I'm viewing it. And I think Nelson Avenue at least is going to be a big price in here.
I'm looking at a horse who was also impressive off the trainer switch. That was Vitality, who was very good in that first start for Roseno. And thinking maybe if I'm trying to beat Bishop's Bay, does he get hooked a little bit wide? Could he get caught up in a battle maybe with Nelson Avenue and Awesome Ruda? And those 3 horses to the outside all pushing each other a little bit could set up for a horse like Vitality from off the pace. So we're both taking a little swing against horse who will probably be even money in here, Bishop's Bay. This is going to go as race number 10, the grade 3 Salvator Mile on Saturday at Monmouth Park. Good luck.